Good afternoon. It's 1:30. So at this time, Lisa Young will take a roll call to see if a quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please respond. Walter Bouchard. Michelle Wilson.
Present.
Thank you. Mike Sonnenberg. Beverly Chanowski.
Present.
Thank you. Mike Denby.
Present.
Thank you. Steve Trussell. J.C. Porter.
Present.
Thank you. Dave Barry. Danae Pressler.
I'm filling in for Danae. My name's Haley Buzalencia. Present.
Thank you. Robert Vondenacker. John Sherrill.
Present.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda.
Present.
Thank you. Ed Stillings.
Present.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Present here.
Thank you. Hondo Judd. Israel Garcia. Thank you. Spencer Camps. Rick Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Kim Butler. Thank you. Aaron Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro. Rhonda Humbles. Matt Potzler. Thank you. Scott DeBias.
Present.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Present.
Thank you. Stan Balone.
Present.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Present.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Present.
Thank you. Excuse me. Michelle Kamikawa. Jonathan Fudge. John Woods.
Present.
Thank you. Michael Chamberlain.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Forrest. Susie Stevens. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Lisa. A quorum is now present. The meeting of the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table at the back of the room and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available also on the information table at the back of the room. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. And hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Moving on to agenda item number 2, call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. I have received no request to speak cards for this agenda item. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to this meeting. Staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
Madam Chair, we received one written comment. I will read it at this time. This public comment is received from Amanda Gray. Quote, on behalf of the Arizona Petroleum Marketers Association, I would like to better understand the process for determining what ozone control measures will be selected and whether rule or statutory changes will be pursued. Several proposals have significant cost implications for small business fuel retailers. We would ask to be included in any future stakeholder input opportunities, unquote.
Thank you for that comment. More information on the control measures will be covered in agenda item number 4. For agenda item number 3, approval of the December 8th, 2022 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Prior to approval, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on agenda item number 3? Seeing none and having received no request to speak cards for this agenda item, staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
As of today, no written comments have been received.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the December 8th, 2022 meeting minutes?
This
Tim
is John
Connor.
Sherrill, City of
So
Chandler.
moved.
Thank you, John. Can I get a second?
Second, Tim Connor.
Thank you, Tim. We have a motion from John Sherrill and a second from Tim Connor. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Those who wish to abstain from the vote, say abstain. And now a roll call vote of all members participating virtually will be taken at this time by Lisa Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Michelle Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike Denby.
Aye.
Thank you. Steve Trussell. J.C. Porter.
Aye.
Thank you. Dave Barry. Haley Buzalencia.
Abstain.
Thank you. Robert Vondenacker.
Aye.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Aye.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda.
Aye.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Aye.
Thank you. Hondo Judd. Spencer Camps. Aaron Cooper.
Aye.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro. Rhonda Humbles.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Tobias.
Aye.
Thank you. Stan Balone.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa. Jonathan Fudge. John Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Michael Chamberlain.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Forrest. Susie Stevens.
Aye.
Thank you. One moment, please. Madam Chair, we have 23 ayes and 1 abstention.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved. For agenda item number 4, update on the draft comprehensive list of new and available ozone precursor control measures, presentation by Matt Poppin with Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We did want to spend some time today getting you updated on where things stand with the comprehensive list of measures. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to look those over, and you will still have more chance to do so. So we want to get you updated on the next steps as well. Next slide, please. And the next slide. Thank you. So in case, I think most members of the committee are familiar, but just again, the purpose of this list, it's important to know where we stand. So back on October 7th, EPA did finalize the reclassification of the Maricopa non-attainment area to a moderate area from marginal with an August 3rd, 2024 attainment date. Our preliminary ozone modeling indicates that additional control measures are needed in order to meet that attainment date. So the control measures that we have currently in place, while they provide continuing benefits, continuing reductions of NOx and VOC, still more is needed. And right now, our modeling is showing that we need approximately a 50% reduction in both NOx and VOC from anthropogenic sources in order to demonstrate attainment in 2023 ozone season. So new measures are definitely needed. And again, just to remind everyone, even though the attainment date is August 3rd, 2024, in order to meet that attainment date, we have to demonstrate attainment in this summer's ozone season. I will add that if we don't, there is a chance that we could also get an extension of that attainment date, even if we don't attain the standard this summer. In order for that to happen, though, all the monitors, the fourth high at all the monitors would have to be 70 parts per billion or less, which would be a pretty significant reduction than what we have seen. But that is theoretically a possibility. Next slide. So given this situation, MAG decided to contract with Ramboll Corporation to develop a comprehensive list of ozone precursor control measures, so measures that control NOx and VOCs, to identify possible control measures here. Really, the purpose of this is we wanted to see what was out there that we don't have currently. And so these are measures that are either being implemented in other states, other regions, or are being thought about being implemented in other states and regions. And so Ramboll developed some spreadsheets that contain their draft list, and hopefully everybody on the committee has been able to review those. We've had those up on MAG's website since November 23rd, and they're going to remain up there. So please continue to consult those. If you haven't looked at those, take some time to get a look at them and see what measures are included there. We're anticipating that Ramboll will complete their report, which will be much more detailed than the spreadsheets, by the end of this month or early March. And as soon as they do, we will get that out to the committee for review. Next slide, please. So in order to, because there's a lot of data on those comprehensive list spreadsheets, we held a workshop and to kind of go over those in detail. So we want to say thank you to all the members who joined that workshop. We had approximately 25 or so members attend. So we had some really good feedback. That was held 2 weeks ago. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did primarily was go through those spreadsheets in detail. And there are two spreadsheets. There's one spreadsheet for point source controls and one for non-point mobile source controls. Again, point sources are our major sources, our major permitted stationary sources. So these are sources that have a Title V permit, normally greater than 100 tons per year of a particular pollutant. And so really, we went through those, and there are 54 control measures on that list. And most of them, all of them are NOx controls. None of them are VOC controls. And they're combustion controls. There's controls for electric generating units, boilers, and engines. So we took some time to walk through those and we got good feedback on those. Similarly, we shifted to the non-point and mobile source controls. Those are separated by controls that we anticipate will have high or medium emission reductions, greater than 1,000 pounds per day. And then we had a tab for the low emissions. So we really went through those 36 high and medium in detail. Got a chance for the committee members to see where those measures came from, how they're being implemented, what are the costs and emission reductions we think might be achievable with those measures. And then lastly, we also looked at measures that are either being implemented or considered to be implemented that would probably be very difficult given our current regulatory authority to implement here. These are measures that would need most likely legislative changes. So these are measures dealing with electric vehicle penetration, Basically, they're mobile source measures that the state has authority over, the legislature has authority over. And so we wanted to let folks know those are out there as well, but those would take legislative action probably in order to be implemented here in Arizona. Next slide, please. So kind of in summary, what I think we discovered in the workshop, some real positives, I think, is there were a lot of measures on there that do have pretty significant emission reductions that can be implemented. There were even some measures that it appears additional emission reductions than what is estimated might be able to be achieved. So I think that's a positive. If we do get commitments for those measures, that will be a good thing. Measures both to reduce NOx and VOC. But there are a lot of challenges. And just to kind of summarize some of these challenges, there's challenges on the cost effectiveness data that's being presented. And this is largely because Ramble doesn't have unit specific data. So this applies specifically, we talked about costs of controls at electric generating units. And so there could be some real cost differentials between what is true at a particular source, at a particular unit, and what Ramble is estimating. So there is some limitations there. Some other big challenges is implementing these measures by the summer of 2023. That's a huge challenge. Our hope is, as people have been looking at these measures, that they're already starting to think about ways that they can implement them. But the reality is we do have to go through this process of getting our suggested list through the MAG committees and then receiving commitments from implementing entities. And so I think one of the things we discuss and would like to continue to discuss with the committee is the idea of receiving commitments to implement measures, even if they are beyond 2023. While this might not help us to attain by the attainment date, it will help us to attain sooner rather than later, which is really important. So that's the best hope of us getting into attainment as quickly as possible. Once you become into attainment, EPA can issue what they know as a clean data finding, which can suspend the planning requirements. So even if we miss the deadline in 2023, but we come into attainment in 2024 or 2025, those planning requirements can be suspended. So I think that's something we want to talk about with the committee, that we would, obviously we want to get measures implemented as soon as possible so we can take credit for them and hopefully see the results this summer. But if not, I think it's important for us to think about looking at implementation beyond 2023 as well. Another topic, kind of general topic that came up is the geographic scope of measures. Really right now, the list is focused on implementing these just within the non-attainment area, and that's what the emission reductions and costs are associated. But if the measures are implemented in a wider area, we can take credit for that as well. So past examples of this is often Maricopa County, when they adopt a measure, they'll adopt it for the entire county as opposed to just a non-attainment area. A similar idea could be thought for Pinal County as opposed to just the non-attainment area. And then of course, the state can think about implementing measures as well within the state. So if they decide to do that, make commitments for that, we can take credit for that within the modeling, and that can help us attain the standard as well, because we do know ozone is transported in both from interstate, so from states around us, but also from outside the non-attainment area within Arizona. So any reductions we can get that are extra to the non-attainment area will only help us hopefully come into compliance. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we talked a lot about the regulatory and legislative hurdles with some of these measures. Again, some of the big ones that come up are mobile source controls. Historically, we have a measure a law that says we can't be stricter than the federal government. That's an important consideration too when talking about these measures. So there's some things that would continue to need to be discussed in terms of getting over some hurdles with some of these measures. But overall, again, we really appreciate everyone's attendance and input. We found that to be really helpful, and we hope the committee found that to be helpful too. And I think we're going to have more opportunity to do that as this process goes along. Next slide, please. So next steps. Really, the next step in this SIP development process is to take this resource, which is our comprehensive list, as well as the feedback we get from members and from associations outside of our membership too, to develop what we call a suggested list of measures. That suggested list of measures is what would be included in a non-attainment area plan. Next slide, please. So really the way this works is MAG staff prepares a suggested list of ozone control measures for consideration by the MAG committees. So it'll go through the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee first, and we'll get feedback from the committee members. And then the committee members will choose to recommend that list onto our policy committees, our management committee and our regional council. Opportunity for public input is available along that whole process. So those are the next steps in the process. And then again, just to remind everybody what this suggested list of measures is, it truly is a suggested list. So if we were to include all of the measures that were on that comprehensive list, it's still up to the implementing entities to decide if those measures are feasible or not. So for example, when we put out a suggested list, we usually include a column that we think who would most likely be the implementing entity, whether that be the state or the county, or even if cities choose to make commitments, they can do that as well. So once implementing entity receives a list, they actually have to go through a process of determining whether that measure is feasible, both economically and technically. For them, if they choose to go forward with the measure, then they make a commitment. Usually it goes through a board of supervisors or through a state department of directors, whoever is making the commitment, and those get sent back to MAG for inclusion in a SIP. So even while there might appear to be a lot of measures on the list that at first glance, folks might say, we don't think those can be feasible, from our perspective, and again, we're willing to take comment on this, we wouldn't want to limit the list at this point. We would want to include most measures on the list to give the most opportunity for folks to make commitments. If there are measures that just we know are impossible, then we don't want to include those for sure. But barring impossibility, I think our thinking now would be to include the most measures possible for folks to consider, and then let the process go from there. Again, air committees and the technical and the policy committees will have input into that list. We've seen examples in the past where a committee will say, we recommend forwarding this list to the policy committees minus this one measure, or we recommend forwarding the list to the committee plus these three measures. So there will be opportunity for the committee to respond as this process goes forward. And again, once that list is out there, those implementing entities decide which are feasible, make commitments for it. And for the ones that aren't, they provide us a justification for why it isn't. It's too expensive, can't be implemented in time, there's legislative hurdles, those type of things. Next slide, please. So here's what we're thinking in terms of the schedule. It's a pretty quick schedule, but again, we're trying to get this out there as quick as possible so folks can hopefully implement things in this summer. So we'll have another update February 23rd at our next committee meeting if we receive any additional feedback from the committee. So continue to review those spreadsheets. You can always email us, call us, let us know. We continue to receive that feedback and we appreciate it. Most likely the report will not be available by the time of that committee meeting. If it is, we'll get it out, but most likely it'll be shortly after that committee. Ramble will have the report. And we'll get that to the committee to review. And then in early March, I think we will plan on releasing a draft suggested list of measures for folks to consider. Right now, we're considering holding another workshop in mid-March to discuss the draft suggested list. So we would appreciate folks' attendance to that. And then hopefully as things progress, we would have bring the suggested list officially to the Air Committee in March for them to make a recommendation on it. We do have a little bit, and then if this schedule holds to form, then the policy committees, management committee and regional council, management committee would be meeting in April. Regional council would also meet in April for adoption of the suggested list if this schedule holds to form. And then we would send out that list to implementing entities and hopefully get commitments back from implementing entities in the summer to do the measures. There is a little bit of flexibility if we want to have more than one workshop, or if we have to push the Air Committee back a week, we could probably do that. But we do really want to get it through as quickly as we can, given how, we want to get measures in place that are available and can be done for this summer. Next slide. So that's really the overview. That's where we stand right now. If there are any questions, I'm open to those. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Do I have any questions in the room?
Yes, this is Mike Denby from APS. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the overview. I'm trying to understand the commitment piece. How does that fit into the timing of rules or mitigation measures by the county or the state? And then you mentioned something about it being a requirement for you guys to submit those commitments to EPA for inclusion in the SIP. Is a commitment like the rule is done, or is a commitment that, hey, we're going to write a rule to do X, Y, and Z? And so that's trying to understand that a little bit better. If you can explain, please.
Right. Yeah, Michael, EPA would prefer, obviously, finished rules. They're not really excited about commitments, so that's what EPA would prefer. So, but unfortunately, given the time frame and just the process that we have historically taken, we receive commitments from the implementing entities. So, for example, Maricopa County Air Quality Department would submit commitments to us, and those commitments would include a timeline for how quickly they could. So if there's measures related to, let's just use gas stations as an example. If there's going to be new measures related to gas stations, Maricopa County would provide us with their timeline of how quickly they can revise the rule to include those new measures that apply to gas stations. They give us also where that they have appropriate staffing, appropriate enforcement authority to make sure that once those measures are done, it will be done, and that they have the appropriate funding for it as well. What's needed in a commitment is spelled out in statute. And so we'll send out what we call a model resolution package with the suggested list. So we did this for the West Pinal plan. If you look at that plan, you can see that we received commitments from Pinal County Air Quality Control District and from the Ag B&P Committee on the rules they would make and the timelines for how quickly they can make those changes. If a city decides to submit a commitment, that it would be a similar thing. This is the ordinance we're going to change. This is the timeline. These are the resources we have to commit it, or if they want to have that included in the SIP. So then those commitments is really what allows us to take credit for those measures. Without those commitments, we can't take credit for those measures in an attainment plan. Again, EPA would love to see a finished rule. That's the easiest thing because it's already on the books, and then it's easier for us to take commitments to. But that's the overall process.
Excellent. Mike Denby again with APS. Thank you, Matt. Follow up on that. So you said the commitment allows you to take credit for those measures. So if we're still exceeding the non-attainment number, how does that work? We take credit for it, but it doesn't show up in real time. So does it matter? If you can help me understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, and this is really on that earlier slide where we talked about the implementation, the timeline hurdle, right? I think this is where we're kind of being creative a little bit and thinking outside of the box. I would say, in a perfect world, we would get commitments where the implementation would be done this summer by June 1st. We would have rules in place, or measures in place that we could start taking credit for. And then hopefully that would be enough that we would then model and be able to show attainment. But I think we all know the reality of that is very difficult. So I think we're looking for, even if Maricopa County or another state would say, we think reasonably the earliest we can get this rule in would be for the 2024 summer. I think we would like to go ahead and receive those. It does change our planning, how we would submit a plan to EPA. We would have to think about being creative again. Some of the ideas we have is presenting to EPA, hey, we're doing as much as we can. We still can't attain, but we feel like we can meet other parts of the planning requirements, whether it be RACM or reasonable further progress for the 15% VOC reduction. And so really, we want to see what folks are able to do. So once we get those commitments back, we'll have a better idea if they will be significant enough to help with the demonstrate attainment. We'll be, of course, monitoring the air quality data. I think both are pretty unlikely, but what would be more unlikely would be an extension. If we were able to get an extension, then it makes more sense to have commitments kick in 2024 because we would have another year. But again, an extension is pretty optimistic too, given the air quality data. So I think what we're thinking is we feel like we want to put these measures out there now and get commitments back so we can get into attainment as quickly as possible. But it will be difficult, and we will have to think kind of creatively in terms of submitting a plan to EPA. We're already late. As you know, the deadline is January 1st. Most areas in the country are late, given that they just upgraded everybody in October. So there's a couple issues to think through. It's not an easy answer.
Thank you, Matt.
Do we have any other questions on this agenda item?
Hi, this is Tim Connor, City of Scottsdale. Matt, thank you for the good presentation and also all the hard work that you're putting into this. Can you help me to understand where we can find a list of these different measures that you are considering so that we can review those, at least with internal staff?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to MAG's webpage, our regional air quality planning webpage, you'll see those draft list of measures on there. They're right at the top. There's 2 spreadsheets on there. And again, what we'll do is we'll largely, the suggested list of measures will probably largely mirror what's on that comprehensive list. And then we'll come out with that. But we do want, before we do that, we wanted Ramble to complete the report. Again, we wanted to hear feedback on if some of those measures are truly impossible. We don't want to put them on the list. But again, our thinking at this time is we would put the majority of those measures that are on that comprehensive list, we would put those on a suggested list for folks to think about. We'll have a short write-up on each of those measures so people can understand what they are, as well as just kind of a table format, as well as some cost data, again, and emission reductions data. But right now, what we have available is what we provided already is that comprehensive list.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Matt. Agenda item number 5 is the EPA completeness finding for the 2022 Serious Area Particulate Plan for PM10 for the West Pinal County non-attainment area and termination of Clean Air Act sanctions clocks. The presentation will be by Matt Poppin and Tim Franquist with Maricopa Association of Governments.
Yeah, thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We just wanted to share some good news with the committee. So if you remember, the 2022 Serious Area Particulate Plan for PM10 for West Pinal County was adopted by the MAG Regional Council in the state in May 2022 and submitted to EPA on May 31st. EPA then provided us a letter in November, which is in the agenda packet. So and really what this letter does is it's saying that the SIP that was submitted is complete. It meets all of the criteria that you're supposed to have in a SIP. And really what the benefit of this completeness finding is it turns off some sanctions clocks that have been running when the moderate area plan was withdrawn. That was back in May 2021. When that plan was withdrawn, sanctions clocks started ticking for the suspension of highway funds and 2-to-1 offsets for industrial sources within the non-attainment area. Those sanctions are now suspended and terminated because EPA has found our plan to be complete. So we wanted to share that good news with you. So we no longer have those sanctions clocks to worry about. We continue to wait for additional EPA action on this plan, and we'll keep you updated as that comes along. But I did want to give Scott Tobias from Pinal County an opportunity to kind of update the committee on where they stand with the commitments they made for the rules in that plan. Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Just a general update, and I think this kind of goes in line with Mike Denby's question about commitments. The Pinal County Board of Supervisors committed to do a rulemaking in August of 2021. And yesterday they adopted those rules. We started the formal rulemaking process in early November and went through the whole public comment period and stakeholder meetings and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, the Board of Supervisors adopted our West Pinal construction and general fugitive dust rules that check the boxes for best available control measures and most stringent measures. They go into effect June 1st, and we're getting ramped up on that and currently putting together the state implementation plan submittal package to send off to ADEQ here in the near future. And that's the update for me.
Thank you, Scott. We really appreciate the hard work that Pinal County Air Quality Control District put into this. EPA had asked us, is there any way you can do those quicker? And Pinal County did. So they got these in way ahead of schedule, ahead of their commitments, which was a big lift. So we really appreciate that. Anything, Tim? Or
I think other than say that Scott, I think, wins the award for the fastest rule package on planet Earth. So just really appreciate that. Again, all these efforts, I know Matt's sense of urgency to get this plan in, but again, we can't do this alone. So we just appreciate, ADQ's involvement, Pinel's, and then of course, Matt's great effort. So just want to thank everybody, and again, we inch closer to success on this. So.
Yeah, thank you. We're available for questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions on agenda item 5? Okay, hearing none. We will move on to agenda item number 6. EPA final rule, control of air pollution from new motor vehicles, heavy duty engine and vehicle standards. Presentation by Matt Poppin and Tim Franquist with Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Yeah, we just wanted to take a couple minutes to let you know about this new rule. We included a fact sheet in your agenda, so please take a look at that. It's a pretty comprehensive rule. I'll just take a couple minutes to highlight some of the things in that fact sheet for you. So back in March of 2022, EPA proposed this rule, and it went final in December of 2022. And so this is going to be new nitrogen oxide standards for heavy duty trucks. So these are the semis and the very heavy trucks on the road. It'll kick in with model year 2027. And it'll be pretty significant NOx reductions. I think EPA in their fact sheet says they anticipate a 50% reduction in heavy duty NOx emissions by 2045 as a result of this rule. One of the things we've noticed in our non-attainment area is that heavy truck traffic does continue to increase and does continue to become a larger share of the NOx emissions. Interesting enough, EPA in their fact sheet even states that without this rule, they anticipate that 90% of the NOx emissions in 2045 from mobile sources would come from heavy duty trucks. So it's a significant category. So this will have benefit for ozone. Unfortunately, it's not this summer. We would love that. And also PM 2.5. So those are two things that we're looking forward to. Other couple things I would highlight is this is part of EPA's larger clean trucks plan. So 2 more rules are coming out. They anticipate this year. One for medium duty trucks. So those are like the Amazon delivery trucks, large vans, large kind of delivery vehicles. Again, those will be NOx standards again. And then they're also going to do actually that's a multi-pollutant. So that'll be NOx, PM 2.5, and possibly VOC for the medium duty trucks. And then EPA is also going to come out with some new greenhouse gas rules for trucks as well, which could have some co-benefits as well. So there's more to come, and we'll keep the committee updated on that. One of the interesting things too that I found with this rule is it's not just tailpipe standards. There's some new ways that EPA will ensure that these are being met as opposed to just testing at a testing site. There's some in-use requirements and some maintenance requirements. So this will help ensure that these NOx standards are being met and not tampered with as well. So hopefully this will help with our ozone problem, and we just wanted to let the committee know about it. If there are any questions, we're available.
Thank you. Any questions on agenda item number 6? Okay, hearing none, we're moving on to agenda item number 7. EPA proposed rulemaking for reconsideration of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for particulate matter. And Elias Toon with Maricopa Association of Governments will be providing the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here today to talk about the EPA's proposed rulemaking for reconsideration of the particulate matter NACs. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So just as a quick background, the Clean Air Act Section 109 directs the Environmental Protection Agency Administrator to propose and promulgate primary and secondary air quality standards, primary being focused on protecting human health and secondary focused on public welfare. Clean Air Act Section 109D1 also requires EPA to review existing air quality criteria every 5 years and update those as appropriate. And for particulate matter, EPA last completed its review on December 18th of 2020 and retained both the primary and secondary particulate matter coarse PM and fine PM standards without revision. Next slide, please. However, on January 20th, 2021, President Biden issued an executive order which directed a review of certain agency actions, which included the 2020 particulate matter standard final action. And 1 year later that summer, in June 10th of 2021, EPA announced a decision to reconsider that standard. And then this on January 6th, 2023, EPA proposed a rule to revise those particulate matter standards. Next slide, please. So just a quick dive into that proposal. I think kind of the biggest one is EPA's proposal to revise the primary annual PM 2.5 standard. EPA is proposing to lower the level from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to within a range of 9.0 to 10.0 micrograms per cubic meter. However, they're also taking comment on revising that standard down to as low as 8.0 and as high as 11.0 as well. For the primary 24-hour PM 2.5, EPA is proposing to retain the current level. However, they are taking comment on potentially lowering it to as low as 25 micrograms per cubic meter. Next slide, please. Further in the proposal, EPA is proposing to retain the primary 24-hour PM 10 NACs at its current level. And for secondary PM standards, the EPA is also proposing to retain those standards at this time. However, similarly, they are taking comment on revising the secondary 24-hour PM 2.5 standard as low as 25 micrograms per cubic meter. Next slide, please. So just to take a little bit deeper dive into how that impacts the MAG region. Next slide, please. We can look at this graph of the PM 2.5 monitoring data. On the top dotted line, you can see that's the current annual standard of 12.0 micrograms per cubic meter and the region's progress towards meeting those standards. The top bar is 10 and the bottom red bar is 8.0. So you can kind of see where the region would fall with the most recent 2021 data, kind of within EPA's potential proposed range. We're not quite sure where that standard will fall. It could be 10, 9.5, 9, anywhere in between there. But this is just kind of where we currently sit, 9.8 with 2021 data. Next slide, please. It's a little hard to see, apologies, but you can kind of see the distribution across the valley where the primary place where you're going to see elevated PM 2.5 values is going to be kind of in the urban core. You're going to see West Phoenix, Durango Complex, South Phoenix having the highest PM 2.5 values, as well as some elevated values down in Pinal County around Hidden Valley, about 12.7 down there. However, I would like to note that we do not believe that Hidden Valley would be used for setting standards, as that's typically used as more a source-specific hotspot monitor based off past EPA precedent. So it's most likely to affect the Maricopa region and specifically the urban core. Next slide, please. So fortunately, the Maricopa County Air Quality Department was gracious to provide us with some preliminary data for 2022. I will caveat that this data is not QA and QC'd and AQS, so these values are likely to change. But as you can see in the farthest right-hand column, with 2022 data, there are 3 sites that are above that 10 micrograms per cubic meter standard, specifically Durango Complex, South Phoenix, and West Phoenix are all above that 10.0 standard. So if the standard was lowered to anything less than 10, those 3 sites are the ones currently that would be at risk. Next slide, please. And kind of just to give a closer view of, kind of that urban core, I've circled the 3 monitors here, which have those elevated values above the proposed standard. Next slide, please. And just so you guys are aware of kind of where these emissions are coming from, I've included a slide from Maricopa County Air Quality Department's 2020 periodic emission inventory for PM 2.5, which came out in November of 2022. As you can see, by large, the non-point category is the largest category of PM 2.5 within the Maricopa County area. And some major contributors are on the right here. Those include fuel combustion, industrial processes, agriculture and livestock, miscellaneous sources, and fugitive dust as well. Next slide, please. So some next steps for this process, EPA is going to be soliciting public comments for 60 days after the proposal is published in the Federal Register. That hasn't published yet, so once it is, there'll be 60 days for people to comment on that. If the PM standard is revised, the Arizona governor will have 1 year after promulgation of the revised standard to submit to EPA recommendations on designations and boundaries for the state of Arizona. EPA is required to designate areas within 2 years of the promulgation of a revised standard. And within their proposal, EPA has indicated that the design values that are likely to be used are 2021 to 2023. So we are just looking at the 2022 design values. So they'll most likely be using 1 additional year for that. So those sites that we saw that were just over the proposed potential upper threshold of 10, anything that could be done this year to lower those values could potentially stave off being designated non-attainment for the PM 2.5 standard. So, next slide, please. And I'm available to take comments. Thank you.
Do we have any questions in the room? We do. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, thank you. If you could just go back a couple of slides to the chart. I was just curious. So if I understand this correctly, the non-point category has been pretty consistent from 2011 to 2017, but then there's a huge spike in 2020. And I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on why that is, why it doubled?
Yeah, within the periodic emission inventory, they stated that the increase in PM 2.5 emissions was almost entirely driven by increases in wildfire emissions as well as commercial cooking. So that allowed for an increase of about 4,000 and 2,500 tons respectively between those 2 categories, which had almost 100% jump from the previous year. So those 2 were the substantial categories that led to that increase.
Thank you. And also, I was just curious, are you guys planning on making a comment on that, or can you talk about that?
Pass that over to Sam, I think.
Madam Chair, Mike, yeah, that's a good question. I don't think MAG would make a comment on that, mainly because we're not a toxicological or health-based organization. We're a planning organization. So we would probably look to ADAQ or Maricopa County on that portion, or maybe Maricopa County Health or the Arizona Department of Health Services. So again, we have our thoughts on it, but from a toxicological standpoint, health-based standpoint, we're going to just leave that to you guys.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any other questions on this agenda item from those attending virtually? Okay, hearing none. Agenda item number 8 is the request for future agenda items. Are there any requests by membership for an item on a future agenda? We know that in February and March, we'll likely be discussing the ozone control measures. So those are already on the list, but are there any other requests? Okay, hearing none. Business is now concluded. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
This is Ramona. We're Town of Queen Creek. I will motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.